All right, good morning, everyone. I'm so glad you're here this morning. Now, as you may know, we finished with our series about knowing God a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to start a new series in a couple of weeks known as Gifted. Please come back for that. It's going to be exciting. Meaning that we are currently in the in-between time between these two series. Now, this is always a great time to reflect just a little bit on life and to share some of the things that God has taught me recently. And now I don't know why I had to bring this specific message this morning, but it's my hope, friends, and it's my prayer that God will speak to some of you through it. That it may just be the word of encouragement that some of you may be in need of today. So that's my hope, that's my prayer. Now, to be honest, the title might be slightly misleading. The title is actually, if I can get to it, Lessons at the Wedding. That's the title. Now, and it may be misleading because we recently had quite a big wedding in our church. I'm pretty sure all of you are aware that Zelda and Etienne got married in the summer, and it really was a very special wedding. And I could probably draw a few lessons from it if I wanted to. You know, like we are just so much stronger when we work together, or maybe how God can bring something beautiful out of the deepest hurt, or I can even tell you a story about the magnolia tree. If you want to know more what I'm referring to, please come and speak to me and I will tell you. But that is not what I'm going to do today. That's not what I want to do. I want to share a few lessons from a wedding that took place a little bit longer ago than that. In fact, this happened before any of you got married. In fact, this happened before any of you were even born. This happened around 2,000 years ago, and I think you are pretty aware of this story. You probably all know this story very well. And yet, when I read it a few weeks ago, again, it struck me as a story that doesn't only tell us something about Jesus, but there are actually a few practical life lessons in it as well that I think we could all learn from. So, before we delve into the story, the guy who wrote it down was someone by the name of John. And he was one of Jesus' closest friends. And when you look at the four Gospels in the Bible, so Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then John, you will see that the Gospel according to John is slightly different than the others. And instead of mentioning many of Jesus' miracles like the others, he just mentions a few. And then he did it for a very specific reason. And he tells us actually exactly what his reason for it was. Here it is in John 20, verse 31. He said, "But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in His name." And so, before we even get into the story, can I just make the point of the story very clear, so that there's no ambiguity about it. The point is that it's there to show us that Jesus is the Son of God, who came so that each one of us can have life and have it to the full. And when John wrote this first miracle of Jesus down, his aim was to give us an eyewitness account so that you can also put your faith in Jesus. That you will also believe that he actually was who he claimed to be, the Son of God. And if you've never done so, it's my hope that this story will just help you to take that step. Now, either way, I think there are some practical life lessons for all of us in the story. So let's just read this story, and as we read it, I'm going to unpack it. And I'm going to draw some of the lessons out. Now, there are probably more lessons and lessons that I missed, but here are a few that I identified. So let's start with the story. And I was warned that this may happen, so cut out. Unless some of you have two AA batteries. I'm going to go without it. Okay. Right. So, here it is. John 2, verse 1 to 11. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana, in Galilee. Now, friends, from a literary point of view, this is written in such an amazing way. It's almost like a new creation account. You know the creation story in Genesis? You know how it starts? It starts with, in the beginning. And then it goes on and says, on the second day, God made this. On the third day, he made this, and so on. And so when John starts his gospel, he starts with the words, in the beginning. Just like in Genesis. And then shortly after that, he tells us how John saw Jesus, how he baptized him, and how he recognized him as the Lamb of God. And then the next day, the first disciples started following him. And then on the third day, there was a wedding. It's like John was telling us that something new was happening. God was creating something amazing. So there's anticipation in the text itself. The question really is, okay, what's going to happen next? So when you read it, there's a lot of anticipation and excitement in the text itself. Now, weddings were big affairs in Jesus' day, not unlike in our day. And it's still quite big affairs. Except their celebrations often went on for days. So this was a big event in a small town. Let's read it. Let's continue to read. Jesus' mother was there. And Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. Now at this point, Jesus had just gathered his first disciples. And at the end of the story, we read that this was actually Jesus' first miracle. So he hadn't done anything miraculous up to this point. He hadn't done anything amazing or miraculous yet, except telling one of the guys who followed him the following. This is just in the previous chapter. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Now to us, this doesn't sound like much. I mean, it really doesn't sound like much. But Nathanael's response clearly proves us wrong. Because listen to how he responded. He said, then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." Now, we don't know what happened under the fig tree. It's open for speculation, We don't know what happened there. But it clearly was something very profound to Nathanael. And just before that conversation, John the Baptizer spoke about Jesus. And that was why some of his disciples eventually went to follow Jesus. And so there was this anticipation, not just in the text, but there was this anticipation around Jesus. Who he was and what he was supposed to do and what he was here to do, but it wasn't clear yet. Either way, the newlyweds decided to invite Jesus and his disciples to this important event in their lives. And this is the first practical lesson I want to point out. Invite Jesus before you have a crisis. Okay, that's the first lesson. Invite Jesus before you have a crisis. Now, friends, of course you can invite Jesus when you have a crisis as well, and that's actually recommended, and I do recommend that you do that if you have a crisis. Invite Jesus in, that's a good idea. I just think it would be wiser to do it before the crisis happens. You see, so often, people wait until things go badly wrong before they get to know Jesus. And that's fine, because in the end, what's important is that you get to know Jesus. I mean, that's the important bit. However, if you can do that before you experience the crisis, it will give you a lot more peace of mind in the crisis. Because then you know that no matter what happens, no matter what comes across your path, you are not alone. And you can immediately ask Jesus for his intervention. You will know who to turn to when you don't know who to turn to. Okay? You will know who to turn to when you feel like there's nowhere else to turn. We all need miracles at some point in our lives. It's just so much easier to deal with the crisis if you know that a miracle worker is already in your life. Now back to the story. Okay, that was my little takeout. Back to the story. At this point, they didn't know they would need a miracle soon. But they knew they wanted Jesus at their wedding. And it wasn't about what he could give to them. It wasn't about what he could do for them. They just wanted him there. And may I just encourage you, friends, to spend time with Jesus. Not because of what he can do for you, but because of who he is. Get to know him better. It will definitely change your life for the better. Anyway, even though they didn't know that they would need a miracle soon, that is exactly what happened in the story. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Okay, now John didn't tell us why the wine were gone. It could have been that they just really had an amazing party. I mean, they just had an incredible time, incredible wedding celebration, and it went on longer than they expected. Or it could be that the host just didn't have a lot of money and they just couldn't afford it anymore. Either way, this was a crisis because hospitality was very important in those days. And in a small community like this one, wine running out before the celebrations died down would have been a talking point for a long time afterwards. And it would have been extremely embarrassing to this couple. In fact, Some people who liked to gossip may have even said that this was a bad omen for the wedding couple. So no matter how you looked at it, friends, this was not good. But Mary, the mother of Jesus, she knew who Jesus was. And so she tells him about their crisis. And immediately, he knows that she's not telling him to just make conversation. Okay, so there's a reason for her to tell him that. She's telling him because she knows he can do something about it. And then Jesus responds in this way. He says, "Women, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come." Now, to us, this sounds strange, when Jesus speaks like this, because it sounds a little bit disrespectful, but because we don't speak like that in English. But it was quite normal in their language. And it definitely wasn't disrespectful. It was just the way they sometimes addressed people in that culture and in that time and in that language. Now, what's interesting about this conversation, though, is that in John's account of Jesus' life, time plays quite an important role. And specifically, Jesus' hour plays a big role in his whole gospel, which refers to his mission of redemption and salvation for all humankind. And so this theme and these words are repeated several times throughout the gospel according to John. Anyway, it sounded like Jesus was telling Mary that he wasn't yet ready to go public with his ministry. But just listen to how she responds, which is just as interesting. His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." So it sounds like she just ignored it. She just ignored what Jesus said. Jesus just said, "Oh, my time isn't here," and so she turns away from him and says to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to do." But, if you look carefully, it shows her immense faith in Jesus. Which reminds me a bit of another episode that happens in Mark 7. Please go and read it for yourselves. It's about, maybe you know the story of Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman, where he had this conversation with her, and she's from a different ethnic background. And so he said, "Listen, I'm only sent to the Jews, specifically to the Jews, and they were the focus of his ministry." And then she didn't say, "Okay, I understand," she walked away. No, she didn't let it go. And she responded so cleverly to Jesus that Jesus recognized her faith, and he actually honored her for it. And in Luke 18, Jesus tells a story. You can go and read that story as well. So Mark 7, Luke 18, if you can remember. Okay, so it tells a story about a persistent widow who asked an unjust judge for justice. And she does it so persistently that he gives in at the end and he grants her wish. And then Jesus concluded like this in the story he told. He said, "And the Lord said, listen to what an unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones, who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off?" And then he says something really profound. And this is the lesson in it. And then, I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on it? Will he find faith on it? We need to keep our faith when we ask God for his intervention in our lives. Anyway, Mary knew who Jesus was. And therefore, it didn't matter what he decided to do, whether it was his hour yet or not. She trusted him. And they simply had to obey him. Which brings me to the second lesson we can learn from this wedding, and that is, do whatever Jesus tells you. Just do whatever Jesus tells you. Mary's faith was bigger than the crisis they faced. And she knew she could trust Jesus. Whether he decided to go public yet or not, didn't really matter. She just trusted Jesus. That was the bottom line. And maybe we all need to heed Mary's advice. When you've invited Jesus into your life, don't pick and choose what you want to obey and what you don't want to obey. He sees the bigger picture. He knows the timings and what he wants to achieve in your life. And therefore, resolve that you will do whatever he tells you, whatever that may be. Now, that may not quite fit 100% with what you were planning, and it often doesn't, and it may not be very convenient, and it often isn't, but still, do whatever he tells you to do. You may just find yourself being part of a miracle that you didn't expect. Which is exactly what happened to these servants. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Now, these were big jars, friends. In fact, in our language, it would translate to holding around 90 to 100 liters of water. So, just imagine these servants who were very busy. I mean, they were serving guests, they were cleaning up, they were preparing food, they were doing everything that was necessary to keep the guests busy, happy, and they were so busy doing that, and suddenly they're told to fill these jars. Now, you can just imagine, what must have gone through their heads is that, but it's already been used. I mean, this water is gone for a reason because it served its purpose. It's not necessary anymore to have them filled up, so it may seem a little bit pointless to go and do that. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. Now, even for us, if we had to fill those jars and we only had a bucket of water, even if we had a tap, like we do, even if we had a tap, it would have taken us quite a bit of time to go and fill it. Now, for them, it meant going to a well and pulling up bucket after bucket of water, probably at least 60 buckets of water, to fill those jars, at least 60. This is not something you do very quickly. Okay, this will not take just a few minutes. This is a laborious task. Yet, that is exactly what they did. And the text doesn't say anything about them complaining about it or saying that it is a strange request or anything like that. It just said, so they fill them to the brim. I love this sentence. I just absolutely love this sentence because Jesus told them to do something and they did it to the absolute extreme. They could have looked for a loophole in what Jesus was saying, in his command, like, yeah, Jesus didn't exactly say how full it should be. I mean, he didn't quite specify. Or they could have I think they could have gotten away with putting in a little bit less. They didn't have to fill it to the brim. But to them, there was no half measures. They filled it to the brim. And that is the third lesson for us in this story. Third takeaway is, whatever you do it fully. Just do it fully. Friends, so often we think we can get away with doing something half. And if we think we can get away with doing something half, we will. We will try it. I mean, if there's a loophole, we tend to take the loophole. It's like God said I should forgive. He didn't say anything about forgetting. So I will just hold on to this hurt. I will never forget what they did to me. And then you wonder why on earth there's still so much bitterness in your heart towards someone else. Or, yes, I know it's important to meet together as a spiritual family on a regular basis. I know that. But God will understand. My life is quite busy. I have no other day to lie in except a Sunday morning. So I'm sure God will He will forgive me if I just lie in on a Sunday morning. That's absolutely fine. And friends, so often, especially when it comes to our faith and our relationship with God, we tend to do things half-heartedly. Yet I think if we develop this attitude of living life to the full and doing everything we do fully, that we will not only experience immense spiritual growth in our lives, but we will actually see the fruit of that in our lives as well. The breakaway weekend, I spoke about living inspired lives. And in the end, my conclusion was that an inspired life is living life to the full. And it's like living like Paul urged us to in 1 Corinthians 10 when he said, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. And I told you about King David being known as a man after God's own heart and how he lived life to the full. There were no half measures for him, no holding back. And Jesus himself said that he came to give us life to the full. And when he was asked what the greatest command was, this was how Jesus responded. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, don't hold back. Don't hold back. Live life to the full. And when Jesus tells you to put water in a jar, you fill that jar to the brim. If he tells you to be generous to someone in need, you're as generous as you can be towards them. when He tells you to be kind to someone and respond with a gentle answer, leave the sting and the sarcasm out of that answer and be fully kind. When He tells you to make peace with someone or forgive someone who hurt you, don't hold on to the hurt and the pain and feel it every time you see them. Let it go. Pass it to Jesus. He'll take care of it. Do what you are called to do and do it fully and trust God for the rest. Now, even though the servants obeyed fully, they were still very much aware of exactly what they put into the jar. Pure water. No additives. Nothing else. Pure water. H2O. In its purest form. Then He told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so. They did so. They knew it was still water, but they resolved to do whatever Jesus told them to do, whether that was strange to them or not. And so they took it to the master of the banquet, probably expecting a bit of a lambasting for the audacity to bring him water when he wanted wine. You know, somebody wanted wine, don't bring him water. And so, but without protesting, they did what they were told to do. They were, no, but what about my reputation? Or let's just taste it first to make sure. You know, before we do that, let's just make sure it is actually something else. Only they did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. Now this sentence, friends, is so incredible to me because it is so matter of fact. It's just so matter of fact. Remember, the last thing that was told about us about the contents of the jar is that it is water, a lot of water. No mention of it being turned into wine. And when you read the sentence, it's almost like, well, what else did you expect? I mean, of course it was turned into wine. It was like from the moment Jesus told them to fill the jars, the water being turned into wine was inevitable. It was always going to happen. And maybe Jesus' hour hadn't arrived yet when they started, but now it certainly was here. And what I find interesting is that it probably took them at least an hour or two to draw the water and fill the jars. And maybe this is another lesson we just need to learn. And that is that while we wait for God to determine the outcome, we should do what He told us to do. Until that point. Meaning that you obey the last thing He told you to do. You continue to seek His face. You continue to seek His will. You continue to pray. You continue to spend time with Him. You continue to be kind. You continue to be generous. You continue to be good and compassionate and faithful and joyful and patient. And you do that until His hour has come. Until He does what He wants to do in your life. You continue with what He told you to do. And maybe some of you are here this morning to just hear this. Maybe it feels to you as though you are waiting for God to do a miracle in your life and in your circumstances. And it feels as though it is taking forever to fill those jars. It is just taking so long to fill the jars. May I just encourage you to continue to fill those jars. Continue to do so. Fill it to the brim and trust God and trust Him to change the water when His hour has come. Not yours. His hour. Back to the story. He did not realize where it had come from. This is now the master of the banquet. Okay, you'll just have to trust me. Apparently I didn't put it there, so just trust me. This is what the text says. Go and read it afterwards. John 2. Okay, he did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. And here's the fifth lesson. Jesus often leaves the best for last. Jesus often leaves the best for last. And therefore, friends, don't despair. We are called to obey, not to control the outcome. That is up to Jesus. We are not always sure what to expect. We are not always sure when to expect it. And we are definitely not always sure how it is going to happen either. All I can tell you is this. No matter what it is, no matter when it is, no matter how it happens, when it does, when His hour has come, you can know that it will be the best. Can I just say that sentence again? Because I think this is quite important. No matter what it is, no matter when it is, no matter how it happens, when it does, when His hour has come, you can know that it will be the best. God knows exactly what you need. He knows the exact crisis you're in, and He knows the exact miracle you long for. He knows the tears you cry when you think no one sees. He knows the longing of your heart, and He cares more than you know. And what I know is that He wants the best for you. He wants you to experience Him and get to know Him in the midst of even your worst crisis, and that is the best, if you get to know Him through it all. And so that brings us to our last lesson at the wedding, and that is that Jesus will show His glory, and that will build your faith. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which He revealed His glory, and His disciples believed in Him. Friends, no matter what your circumstances may look like, no matter how hopeless it may seem, God is still in control. And He is still the glorious, almighty, all-knowing, ever-present God. He still has a plan for your life. He's still got a purpose for you. And He's not finished with you yet. He wants you to learn, to trust Him, and to follow where He leads. And so, friends, may I just encourage you that whether you are currently experiencing a crisis or not, just invite Jesus into your life. Make sure He is there. He will give you more peace of mind than you can ever imagine. In Philippians, we read this. Philippians 4. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation. So no matter what it is, doesn't matter what your situation is. You may say to me, Jacob, but you don't know what I'm facing right now. This is quite a blanket statement here. In every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So friends, resolve to do whatever He tells you to do. Whether that is extremely challenging and may take you out of your comfort zone or not. And then, don't do it half-heartedly. Decide to do it to the full. Whatever it is that He tells you, just do it to the full. Fill that jar to the brim and trust Him to do with the contents what only He can do with the contents. Trust Him for the outcome, but keep busy while you wait, doing the last thing He told you to do, knowing that your life is not over yet. Your story is not finished. And God's timing is always perfect. Always. So who knows? You may just be leaving the best for last. And so, whatever you may be facing right now, glorify Him through the way you are approaching it. And trust that He will show you His glory, and let that build your faith. Friends, here's the bottom line of all I said in the last half hour. If you are in need of a miracle, make sure you've invited the miracle worker to your life. Oh, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for your word. Lord, I want to pray for everyone who's going through a crisis right now. Please just reveal yourself to them and help them to put their trust in you, to follow where you are leading them, and to do it fully, Lord, even if they don't feel they've got the strength for it anymore. Please help them to know that you are the one who can turn water into wine, and that you often leave the best for last. That their story is not finished yet, and you still got a purpose and a plan for their lives. In Jesus' name we pray this. Amen.